Okay, hello and welcome. This is MSDynamicsWorld.com's Spring 2015 CRM webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert, and today we're joined by Scott Sewell of Hitachi Solutions. Scott is a Microsoft MVP for Dynamics CRM. He's also a returning presenter for us. He has run a couple of really well-received sessions on XRM Toolbox in the last year, and he's back today to talk about something that is equally interesting to the Dynamics CRM community, judging by the interest in today's event, and that is data migration using SSIS. Before we get started, I'd also just like to recognize our CRM series sponsors and thank them for their support of MSDynamicsWorld.com. They are Marketo, Power Objects, and Scribe. Just to get things started, I want to remind you that we do welcome questions during today's session. You can use the Q&A block that you see to the right of the presentation window, and Scott will be leaving some time for questions. So without further delay, Scott, let me give you control and hand things off to you.
Very good. All right. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Very good. So pull up the first slide. Are you able to see the slide? Let's just make sure that I'm starting off correctly. Very good. All right. So technical challenges out of the way. Today's session is really about using SSIS to get data in and out of CRM, both online and on-premise. And this is really a quick start sort of an approach to it. When I first started looking at SSIS as a tool for data migration, and if you're not familiar with it already, SSIS stands for SQL Server Integration Services. It's a part of SQL Server, and it's built, it's kind of the successor to some old previous tools like DTS. And it's really designed to move data from point A to point B, really kind of oriented at probably at batch kind of orientation. But it's incredibly useful, and it's right there available to you if you have a SQL Server installation. When I first started looking at SSIS and trying to use it for some data tasks that I had to follow up on, the learning curve was just huge. I mean, I have some SQL books, and they're 1,000-page books with a lot of screenshots, and they cover this huge variety of things that SSIS can do. And SSIS is a very powerful tool. However, after working on it for a while and kind of getting up to speed, I realized, probably only about 20% of that book is even relevant to me, and I could get things done with just the things in the first 50 pages or so of that. So really this webinar is really focused on how to get up and running using SSIS. Once you're up and running, there's so much that you can do beyond that, but we're going to get over the threshold of learning it and learning sort of the introduction to it, and then once you have that, you're off and running and you can learn. There's so much more that you can do. So let's talk about what all's involved here. So we're going to look at options for how to use SSIS with CRM. We're going to talk about setting it up. We're going to spend most of our time in a demo of setting up a simple. We'll probably start with a lead import, and then we'll finish up with some best practices. So most of this conversation will be demo. But first off, always ask the pre-flight questions before you're getting into a project. What's the data? What's it worth to different people? What's the format of it? How is it available to you? Do your homework. I think my mistake oftentimes is jumping to the technical side of it, and you wind up missing out on some of the reality of the business need for things, and you can burn a lot of hours looking for things that are not appropriate to what you need. As you start down that path, you can also find things that are there are aspects of the way you get SSIS connected to CRM. If you're on premise, SSIS can read from CRM using the CRM filtered views. Just a direct ODBC connection to the filtered views. That's the easiest way you can connect CRM to SSIS if you need to move the data onto some other location or export it for some reason. SSIS can read from those directly. But writing to CRM using accessing through SQL directly is not a good practice at all. In fact, it's a very dangerous thing to do with your data. The same is true for if you're using CRM online. There's no direct SQL access to the filtered views if you're online, or there's no way to write. Of course, there's no way to write to CRM online via SQL. So in those cases, you actually need SSIS plus an adapter, and that adapter really translates the API of CRM, so the SDK gets exposed, and it brings it into SSIS and makes it sort of a destination object inside of SSIS. We'll look at all this about, but there's some choices of which ones are available. Kingsway Soft, you'll see there listed. They have a very good one. In fact, that's one I'll demo with. Cozy Rock is very well received. There's some other ones, including Pragmatic Works, that have come out, and quite a few others that are available. If you wanted to write your own, there's actually instructions on how to write your own if you enjoy pain like that. But I think my preference would be to work with something like a Kingsway Soft because it just it opens up CRM as if it's just another destination in SSIS. And we'll take a look at how that operates. So the quick steps to how do we get up and running. First off, always plan, prepare your data source and structure, meaning, okay, I'm like we've got the trade show leads that are coming in. Well, I probably want to get them into SQL, into a table, remove, clear out of that probably bad leads or excuse me, bad data or records that were like truncated somewhere in the export from the trade show. I want to clean up my data a little bit and get it prepped, as well as decide which columns am I going to bring in, which ones are going to go where, making sure that columns don't exceed the size of the field in CRM. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the process of making sure that your source data connects and represents what goes on in the destination data. Then you'll establish connectivity between yourself and CRM and map them and then execute. It's actually very simple. So without any further ado, let's actually look at the process of how we do that. Let me share my screen here. Let that come up and share. Okay. I should be able to see my demo image, and I've got CRM. This is a copy of CRM Online. This is a preview version for the 7.1 version that will be coming out in the not too distant future. So you may see a little bit of what's coming out ahead of us. But I've got my accounts, and if I wanted to go into the other areas, I can click on that and click and go to sales and look at my leads that are in there. And so, this is the sample data that you're probably all familiar with. But looking at my leads here, I've got a set of data that I want to bring into CRM to add to this lead list. Let me see how many leads we have in there total. All right, 10 leads total in the system. But if I go to, let's say that, coming back from a trade show, my marketing person comes back and has a list of a bunch of leads that she says, hey, we'd like to get these into CRM. So maybe it's in Excel, maybe it's some other format. I'll get it into SQL. That's just my place that I can work from very easily. So let's take a look at what that table might look like. Here's my web. Well, say we're calling these web leads, but what I can do is look at the web lead data that I have and say, okay, I've got first name, last name, address 1, 2. So this looks very much like the CRM data structure if you're familiar with it. Got the pieces that go in there. And yeah, so that looks good. What we'll do is also if I look at CRM's data, the one thing I don't have is a topic in that data. So I've got let me look at a record here real quick. So I've got the things that so I sort of start comparing my source data to my destination data. And if I look here, I need a topic I've got the name of the person and their job title, business. Okay, I've got basics here. If I look at my source data, you know what? I don't have a topic name, so let me create a topic. So I would just, in my case, I would say, I'm going to call these web lead, and I won't be too interesting. Plus, I will take company name and so I'm just putting a little bit of data in here so that we can, and we'll put a person's name in at the end, just so that we have something that identifies who the web lead was. I'll drop that there. And try to get my part of the whole process topic. Call it topic there. So part of the process is getting comfortable with SQL, and I think if you're not comfortable with SQL, that would be a good place to start in the piece. So now I've got just a little bit of my topic area, and I've got the pieces that I need to connect to. So how about we open up, once I'm comfortable with that, and how many records do I have? 716? Okay, terrific. I can open up CRM. Excuse me, not CRM, but Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is really the host for the SSIS tool area. You don't have to have a copy of Visual Studio. If you go to the SQL disk, you can install the Business Intelligence Design Studio, BIDS, I think that's the current name for it. They've changed names on it a couple times, but it is the from SQL, and it will let you use kind of a framework of Visual Studio in order to connect with it. So let me see what it looks like. There was a SQL Server Data Tools, I think is the new name for it. Yeah, SQL Server Data Tools. But again, that's just the parts of CRM, excuse me, the parts of SQL that are used to write these integration points. So now I'm just going to create a new project inside of BIDS, and it gives me the choice of the type of projects that I want. If you don't have this in Business Intelligence area, you may need to install that from the SQL disk. But we'll call it, I want a Integration Services project. So we'll call this, give it a creative name there. And so once I create this this package, it gives me the tools that are available. Now, one thing I've already done is I've already downloaded, installed the KingswaySoft adapter. I just went to kingswaysoft.com, picked the download, downloaded the adapter, ran it, and then when I opened up the Visual Studio, it's just available to me as a tool inside of here. But the two things that I need to do is, one is I need to establish my connections between the two systems that I'm working with. One system on one side is my source, and one system on the right side is going to be my destination. So I need to create these two connection managers. One of them, we'll call it an OLEDB data connection. You can see I've already got the ones in there. So I'll go ahead and create a new one. And we're going to call it, the server name is CRM 411. And I want to select the database. I want to go to demo 1. Test connections, all good. Yep. And okay that. So now I've got the source destination that I can read from, but I also want to create a target destination. So I'll create a target connection. In this case, I'll see my target connection is the KingswaySoft adapter, and so you see it listed there amongst the other types of integration connections that you can establish. When I add that one, it'll prompt me and saying, okay, tell me where is the server that you want to connect to. And in this case, it's a CRM, it's an Office 365 connection. And if I was out, in the U.S., it'll be this one. But if I was in another territory, I would pick that down and choose a different one. But in this case, it's all fine. I am working off a North American server, but I'll go with, oops, see if I can type my name at. Hopefully I typed my password correctly. So what this is doing is it's passing this up and passing to up to CRM the username, and it's giving me access to the different organizations that I have in my account. So I'm connecting to the SSIS demo organization, which is the one I showed you a minute ago. And I can just click test connection and make sure that it can read and write to there. Everything's cool. Click OK and OK. So now I have down at the bottom, I have my two connections. I've got a connection to my SQL database and a connection to CRM. If you'll notice, I'm connecting to CRM through this through the URL and through the web services there. I could do the same thing whether it's online or on premise. If I'm connecting on premise, I could connect to a local server and connect to the SDK. That way, if I want to write or create records in CRM, it's fully supported. It's going in through the API so that if I did an insert and I had a workflow that fired every time I inserted a particular type of record, if I do it through this, that workflow will fire and everything will take care of itself. If I tried to shimmy around behind the scenes and do a direct insert to SQL, none of that workflow or business logic would take care of itself, as well as you'd probably hose up your security. So I wouldn't ever advise doing that. So always use a connection manager of some sort. So to get started, I'll drop a data flow task. That just means inside this task, I'm going to move data from point A to point B. If I open up that task, I'll open that one up. Now you'll see my toolbox changes a little bit, and I can see the types of sources, destinations, and transformations that I can access out of the toolkit. Now, again, this is kind of that perspective I mentioned at the beginning, is that there are a ton of different pieces in this toolkit that are available, and the books that you'll find will go into details on all the pieces, and eventually you may use all those pieces. But in this case, what I found was that most of the time, if I set my source up correctly or set my source up to match what's going to go into CRM, I can just do 2 points. I can do a OLEDB source, which is hard for me to say, and I'll say this is my web leads. Okay, if I open that one up, I'll just say, oh, already there, and pull this down and say, there's my web leads. So it can be, the source can be either a view or a table or something like that. But in this case, I actually have the source doesn't have that topic on it. So I want to use a SQL command. I'll just grab it from in here, and there's only 700 of them, so I don't guess it really matters there. But grab this, C, and come back over here and paste in my source query. And I can preview the output of it and say, okay, yep, that's what I wanted, and I've got all the pieces that I want in there in the proper place. So I can see that it now finds all the columns that I have, and now I've got a source. Now we want to choose the destination. In this case, CRM is our destination. So I'll grab a CRM destination object and pull from my source. The little blue line is the success line. So if I pull that blue line and I'm connecting the dots from the output of the success output of web leads, I'm connecting it to the input of the destination. Now, if you notice, it's still got the red dot, meaning that I need to configure that, of course. So I'll choose my destination connection manager. And in my case, I want to just create leads. So it pulls back the list of leads. Pulls back the lead destination. Anytime I make an update to add fields to my CRM or add new entities to CRM, each time you open this entity, it will check for metadata changes. If you ever need to check for, if you're ever like working real time or interactively, you can always just click refresh CRM metadata, and it will go out, and if you've added new fields or removed fields, it will it'll update this record so that it reflects that. So now that I've got I'm saying I'm going to create leads out of this, I do want to look at my columns and see which columns I have mapped. So if I'll just hide the unmapped ones, say, okay, yeah, I've got because I named them to match the destination, it auto maps those, and so that's useful. But you know what? I don't have my topic field. So let's take a look at what that field is. And in fact, it's not called topic in CRM. I think it's called name. LAM. Find that stage. Where's that topic? See if I can find the right stations, drivers, and maybe I did have it. Go back and find it again. Maybe I'm just missing the obvious here, which is kind of a URL subject. That's it. It's called subject. So in this case, the subject is my destination field, and I can just use topic as my destination. So I'm going to map that field from the topic into the subject area. Also, I have a couple of lookups, which I think I can probably map. Industry, let me look at which ones I have left over here. So I've got lead industry name. See which fields I have. Go to industry code. That might work. Let's try that. And then source. Yep. Let's just leave it like that. I tell you what, I'm gonna take that first one, the industry name out first, and we'll come back and possibly update that one. So now I've got my fields lined up with what I want. Here's all the fields you're going to go over. Click that, and I've got a source, I've got a destination, I've got the mapping. At this point, I've got everything I need to get these records from point A to point B. And if I click the green play button up in the top, you'll see it spin up, and it will go out and run that query against the web leads and retrieve what web leads are in my source query, which is 716 of them. And then you're seeing it spin here. That means it's inserting those records into CRM. And if I go back to CRM and look at my leads, you'll see now I've got 72 and 90 and 97, 103. And so those will continue to roll on in. But I did want to get from start to finish. We took, 15 minutes, even with me talking. That's how easy it is to really get started in SSIS and getting off the ground. And for me, once I got past that point, okay, so things start making more sense, and seeing things were more intuitive from that point forward. So again, it's just a real quick introduction to the way that we get started. So we're seeing these come in, 304 of them, and once this finishes, we'll look at a second type of import that we can do, some alternatives in here. In the meantime, while that's running, I guess we'll see. We've got probably another 30 seconds or so. A couple of things to pay attention to. If you'll notice that when I wrote my query here, in most of the cases, the field names already matched what was in CRM. In this case, if I went back and did it a second time, instead of putting topic there, I probably would change that and call that subject, because that's what matches CRM. And if I do that, CRM is going to automatically map that value. Things like pick lists, I think I can send pick lists directly to CRM with that value. So let me take a look and see if I can do that. But ultimately, you're working through the process of doing that. Later on, as we get records into the system, we'll need to do some updates on those records or some changes to them. So a couple of things that we'll want to do in that process. In fact, let me just go ahead and stop this. We've already got, well, it's perfect timing. It's finished itself for us. Now that we have those records in there, one of the things that I might want to do is do an update to these records. So if I needed to, instead of, if I ran this a second time, it would just create copies of those same values. There wouldn't be anything, they would just duplicates of everything. But if I wanted to do an update to those records, what I can do is change this create and point to an update. There's other values like deletes, upserts, merges, converts, or execute workflow. Those are all very useful tools, but we'll stick with something like an update record. This can be an update action. And I'll click on this and say, I want to update the leads. And lead. And when I connect the dots here, go over to my columns area, and oops, actually I want to do something different. I want to use an upsert in this case. Yeah. So a difference between an update and an upsert is pretty simple. It's an update will find if you have a record that's in your source and there's a matching record based on whatever criteria you set, there's a matching record in CRM for that one, it will just update the values that you have in your source over the ones in the destination CRM. If on the other hand you have a record in your source and it doesn't find a match in CRM, then it would insert a fresh copy of it. So it's doing a little test at the beginning of each record. It's saying, hey, I have this record. Do you have a match in CRM for that record? If so, update it. If not, insert it. Really flexible, very easy. It does come with a little bit of a speed penalty. So I use it for small batches of things where I just, it's like, fine, we'll just do an upsert. It'll be quick and dirty. We'll do it. If I'm trying to push out, thousands of records, I typically will go to the extra trouble of setting it up as an update. And to do an update, I'll actually need to retrieve the values, the GUID values of those unique leads, because I'll use that value to say, I want to update this very specific record in CRM. So that's the difference between an update and an upsert. In this case, I can choose, if I had the primary key, to use that. There's another choice of manual duplicate detection, which works off of the duplicate detection rules. I think that's the way the Cozy Rock tool does it. But in this case, I want to use a manually specify which fields I want to use to check to see, does this record already exist in CRM or not? And what I'll do is actually take this and go to columns and see what I have. Oops, destination. I may not have saved that. So let me check back to the lead. Okay. And I'm going to specify that if I put a key in and say johnsmith@yahoo.com is my key, and I have 3 leads with johnsmith@yahoo.com, I have a choice of, do I update all 3 of those? Do I just update the first one that I get? Do I ignore the whole record entirely, or do I throw an error? In this case, I'm going to just update the first one that I come to with whatever I match on. But in fact, let's go to the columns and say, you know what, that subject line, we call it down here. Find it here, subject. Yep, so I'm going to go my topic line. I'm going to use that as my key. So that topic line is going to be my key between the two systems. So I'll look at the topics that are coming in from my source and say, is there a lead with this exact same topic on it? If so, update the first one you find. All right. We'll click yes or OK. And now, if I run this again, let me go back to CRM real quick. And what I want to do and refresh that. I'm just going to delete about 50 of these. And this will clear those out. That way we can see some inserts going in and some updates taking place as it comes through. Because these 50, there won't be a match in the source data, but the other 300 or so, they'll all be a matches. Anyway, but that's the process that you do to change that to an upsert type of command. Let's take a look. So now it starts off and it's just running through, and it will start inserting some records and updating other records as it goes along. Now again, you do get a little bit of a performance hit by doing the upsert, because it is doing a couple of round trips saying, do you have this record? If not, here's another one. Do you have multiple records? Here's what I want to do. Yeah, so there's a little bit of performance hit that you get out of that process. Let's say instead you had a list of records in CRM that you needed to bring down to a local server so that you could either run a reports, build a reports database, possibly for integration purposes. You may want to get all the GUIDs for CRM records, and you want to bring them down locally so you can do, like I said, a very fast update. So you could use that. Maybe there's data that's going into CRM from other systems that you want to bring locally for a sort of a backup or a data warehouse. A lot of things that reasons why you might want to bring data locally. Maybe it's even bringing it down for analysis to do cleanup against the data. I do that actually fairly regularly. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll start another package here. And this new package, by the way, so these connection managers are based in this package. However, I can right-click on them and convert it to a project connection. If I do that, then any new packages that I create inside of here, they'll automatically have those connection managers available to them. So it sort of makes them, instead of being local to the package, it makes it available to all of them in the project. Certainly saves a lot of time. So let's say that I've got inside of here, I want to use the CRM source data, the CRM source, and I want to pull down a list of the contacts that are in CRM. So I open this up and say the connection manager is that, and my source type is the source entity of, we'll do accounts, as is right at the top. When I do this, it goes up and checks CRM, finds out all the fields that are available, and then it pulls back a list of the fields that I want to retrieve. In this case, it's wide open. It's all the fields, all the fields you probably never used, but nonetheless they're there. Let's say that I want to choose something a little less, a little broad, narrower category. I might want to choose like account ID, account number. I don't know if that's filled in or not, but we'll take it and we'll say address line 1, that, and let's see, address line 1 city, and let's take address 1 state or province, and let's go grab the name for the company. which is name. And so that's just a handful of fields that we've collected. I can use this process to do it and just pick out the ones that I want. Alternatively, it actually does have a feature to choose fetch XML. If you're comfortable with writing fetch, and there's some tools that are available to help make that easier. If you wanted to write this in fetch, it will take the values that I just created and create the fetch XML for it. And I can always edit this directly and say, you know what, I also need and address 1, I'm going to add postal code to that. All right. And I can put variables in there. I use the variables occasionally for do a filter where everything is created on or before a certain time. I'll put a variable in there to say, go get the records that were created after the last time I ran this import. Those types of filters you can add. So it's a very easy way of doing that. So let's just say these are the values that I want to pull down locally. I can click OK. And now I want to pick a local destination. Click that. I'm going to connect the two. Draw the little success line between the two. And this one's going to be an on-premise database. I'm going to send it to a table. And the name of the table, I could choose a table name. But if I've already, let me do one other thing before I do that. I'm going to call this destination. I'm going to rename it and call it CRM account. And if I do the connection again, if I hit new, it picks up the values that I had coming into the system, coming into the destination from the source. So it says, here's my 6 or 7 fields that I've pulled down, and it will create a little table for me. Click OK. Look over the mappings, and there's the mappings from the source table down to the destination table. And I can do that. Click OK. And if I hit run, you'll see it spin up, and it's querying CRM to say, what are the accounts that you have in CRM today? No, there's 10 of them. So it pulls all 10 of those down to my local CRM account table. If I go into CRM and refresh this, I'm saying I now have a CRM account table, and query it, and there's my data. So again, it's just a very fast way of going after records to pull it down locally, which you then probably want to query and say, okay, I'm maybe search against duplicates or look for invalid records for some reason, or potentially if I wanted to, I might be able to use this account number to match up with a back-end database system and say the account number is this, here's my account ID, and pass back to CRM a value like number of days past due or total lifetime value of the customer. Any types of those kinds of records that you may have in another system outside of CRM that you want to pass back up into CRM and update CRM with on a regular basis. So that's another one of the tricks to the whole process, is then once you have it locally, you can use that GUID to update CRM with. And by the way, if you're updating CRM, I definitely would encourage you to use that to pull that down and use that GUID to update the records, because it's so much faster, because you're saying, hey, CRM, this very specific record, I want you to update it. That's much faster than saying, see if you can find a record that sort of looks like this one. Let me know, and then update it if you do. There's a number of cycles that are going on there that you want to avoid if you're trying to do very large scale updates. But again, it's that simple to pull data down. We've taken a look at how you push data up. I want to take another look at some other some best practices that I would encourage you to follow. So I'm going to switch back over to the presentation notes for a second, and let's see, stop sharing, go to the demonstration. Should be, Jason, I think you should be able to see data integration best practices. Is that good?
We do.
Coming up? Very good. So data integration best practices, some common themes that I will follow. They'll show you here in a second inside of CRM or inside of SSIS. Transform the data as close as possible to the source. The more that you can clean your data up before you push it towards CRM, the faster the whole process will go. That's not always possible. Sometimes you're doing a live feed and you're getting some garbage coming from that, and so you're having to sort of transform it on the fly. That's the reality of it sometimes. But if you have a choice, and you have the ability, spend the extra few minutes up front cleaning your data up. If you do that, your whole process is going to be much more robust, and your data is going to be cleaner. And you'll also spend a lot less time reworking things. Second item that I would suggest is move data, as little data as possible. And I mean that by, let's consider if you have 1,000 or 100,000 account records, and you have a past due credit notice flag that you want to set on those records. And so every day you get a list from accounting that says these accounts, these companies have a past due amount. Please update CRM to reflect that. And so out of 1,000 records or maybe 100,000 records, you need to go update. There's probably 200 of those records that need to have that flag set. But yesterday, 199 of those were already set. Because they were already due, and really today there's only one new one that needs to be set. So what I would encourage you to do in this idea of move as little data as possible is, rather than updating all 200 records each day, I would encourage you to look at what's in CRM, look at your source data, and come up with the delta between the two and say, okay, this record needs to have the flag set to yes. This other record was set to yes yesterday, but they've paid off their bill, so we'll send them back to no today. And so then you just narrow it down to just the records you need to update and push those up. You're going to get a much, much faster throughput. You're also going to have much clearer picture of what do you expect to happen. Now, again, if you're dealing with 1,000 records, it's probably not worth the extra effort. If you were dealing with 100,000 records, to CRM Online, you probably do want to spend that extra time to come up with the delta between the two. Additionally, sometimes values have workflows associated with them, so that when you flip a value from one value to another, or you just update the record, the workflow will fire as a result, like assignments, the ownership of a record. What you want to do is avoid updating records that don't need updating, or updating attributes that don't need to be updated. That'll avoid the spurious audit records, workflows firing that don't need to fire. It'll make your integrations run faster. A lot of things like that. We'll take a look at that there. The other thing I would say is bad or questionable data will kill your credibility. So be aware of what your data is, and just because somebody hands it to you and says, push this, do some quality checks on it, and have your customer sign off on the data to say, yes, this is what, we pulled it from your source. Here's what it looks like in CRM. Does everybody agree that this looks right and these values are correct? The worst thing you can do is push data in like the one I just almost will refuse to touch is commission data, because if all the data is 100% right except for one person who they have their commission data is a nickel off from what they expect to see in their paycheck, just because maybe a rounding error happened in the export to you, anything like that, that will kill your credibility. So I will always make sure that where possible, if there's a data source that we're trying to match against, that we go above and beyond all over the place to make sure that we match that data source and try to avoid bringing in things that have that kind of sensitivity. Just redirect them to their source data. Set proper expectations for integration speed, latency. Had a very interesting conversation, to be polite about it, with a customer who was insistent on everything being instantly available in CRM. The moment you hit before you could pull your finger off the enter key in the source system, she wanted everything available to you in CRM. Well, some technical issues with that. We resolved it because we had set proper expectations up front that no, this is a regularly scheduled process. This runs every hour, every day, every 5 minutes, whatever that is. We set up expectations like that helped avoid some problems. So let's take a look back into the environment, and we'll do some just general notes there we could take a look at eventually. But when I talked about a minute ago, so I'll share the screen out as that shares. Take a look inside of SQL, and I'll show you some examples of how I've taken those approaches of cleaning up the data as well as normalizing it and making it look like what you would want CRM to have, as well as only moving the data that you actually need, taking that approach on this process. So in this case, I've got some account data that, here's my source data for my accounts. Pull this up and pull it out. So if you'll notice, this data sort of looks like CRM, but instead of things like last name, it's called LName. Instead of telephone 1, it's called phone. Instead of address 1 underscore line 1, it's home address underscore line 1. Very similar, but not quite that. Account number, company name. A lot of data that's very similar to what's in CRM, but it doesn't exactly match the labeling. So what I typically will do is take a transform approach, and so I'll create a view, and I'll just create this. I'll just create a view that queries that data, and a couple of things that I'll do. One, I'll grab the data and then change the value of it so that I protect it. So I know that the company address line 1 can only be a maximum of 250 characters in CRM. So if the source data one day accidentally drops in something that's 300 characters long, I know my integration is protected, so it will chop. In this case, I'll just chop off the remaining 50 characters. Want to avoid that up front, but I always want to build in protection inside of the integration to make sure that data that's coming from my source matches what can go into CRM. Another thing that I'll do is maybe like formatting phone numbers. I've got a little function here that formats the phone numbers a certain way. I can apply that. You'll also see that I'm changing the value here called, like, for instance, company name in the source data. I'm just renaming it name, which matches what is in CRM. Also within this data, I'm looking for duplicates, trying to remove any duplicates from there. Just a lot of cleanup that I do prior to pushing the data up. And at the end of the day, that gives me a very clean source that will be much more robust to move up. And so now, when I run it, I've got these values available to me. The second piece is I'll take that same data and I'll apply what I call for lack of a better term, a delta view to it. Let me pull that out and show you what it looks like. And this is just using the SQL accept clause. So accept. And I'm saying here's my source data that looks like this. This is what I'm expecting to go into CRM. And then the accept side is on the other side. I'll look and say, all right, just tell me what's already there. And this one's looking at my local table, my local copy of CRM. Just tell me what's already there, and only tell me the things that are different. Just return the records that don't match exactly. Again, this is a very powerful way of narrowing down the scope of what you're pushing into CRM, and that will help, again, speed up the whole process entirely as you move data in and out of CRM. In this case, I'm pointing to a local copy, so let me pull that local copy up. So let me see. Let's look at contacts. I think that's the same idea. Let's take a look at those contacts. There's my transform, and I'll select the top 1,000. So I've got 260 contacts in here. If you'll notice, I'm matching, and there's all the GUIDs associated with it. And if I do the delta, comes back, there's 12 rows that are different between the source and the destination. And those would be the only rows that I would need to update. So again, it's knocking it down from 260 rows down to 12. Sample data, that's not that big a deal, but you're dealing with 100,000 records, it is a big deal. When you're dealing with, in one case I had 17 million records that I needed to worry about. And in that case, you really work very hard because you certainly don't want to run that import twice. You want it exactly right the first time and the only time that you run it to production. So very important. Jason, we're close to the top of the hour. Are there questions that have come up in the meantime?
Yeah, Scott, we have a few questions that have come in, and I'll remind folks to enter your questions now in the Q&A block to the right of the main window. So one question that came in a little while ago. My experience with importing account and contact data using CRM import feature requires creating the account for the contact running at the same time. How does SSIS process this?
Sure. So yeah, you're exactly right. If you want to bring in an account and then bring in a contact and link that contact to the account, in order to link the contact to the account, you'll need the GUID of the account that you created. Two ways you can do that. You can just run your accounts in to start with, and then pull down your list of GUIDs. The other option is as you're inserting those accounts, you can actually retrieve. In this case, I'll just use leads. But coming off of the lead destination, for any insert, I can redirect that row to a table locally, and that becomes my source for my record. So what I would probably do is I'd pull a list of all the accounts that I have in CRM to start with, pull that locally, and then in my import, I would import a record and say, first off, here's my account record. When I insert that, CRM will tell you what the GUID that was assigned to it, and that will come back in through the adapter, and you can save that GUID locally. Then when you get to your contact record, you can say, all right, here's the account I want that I inserted previously. Tell me what the GUID is, and I'll just put that in my parent customer field. So yeah, it's conceptually the same thing, but some of it you can speed up and do a little bit on the fly. I saw the CRM destinations in the SSI toolbox from Kingsway Soft. Yeah, Jake. Yes, I am using in this demo. I'm using the Kingsway Soft tools, and so that's a tool. But like I said, there's other options that are out there. This one just happens to be the one that I prefer. Can you please explain how to see failures in the SSIS package? I'm pretty good at creating failures on the process, but to how to see them, if you'll notice, as the destination goes in, there's this red output piece. One of the ways you can do that is, let me see if I have my trash destination in here. Yeah, there's my trash. There's a destination that if you search for SSIS trash destination, you'll find it at, I think, SQL IS as a location. But it's another destination. The trash destination really only says, give me the information, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to let it evaporate as soon as I hit. So what I'll do is I'll drop a trash destination over here and connect my error output, this red one, to the trash destination. Just say redirect the rows in here. And okay, and then right-click on that. If I right-click on that red line, I'll say enable the data viewer. And in that data viewer, it will tell me as records come out, it will say, here's the record that failed, and here's the piece of information that CRM gave me as to why it failed. So that's an easy way of doing it. You could write it to an actual SQL table if you wanted to, but most of the time I'm just writing it to running out to a trash destination, put a data viewer on it, just so I can see what's happened in there. So good question there, Emma. Don, how do you determine whether to use Cozy Rock or Kingsway Soft? Kind of it's personal. I think it's a preference thing. I know some of my developers at the office really prefer the Kingsway Soft. The Cozy Rock tool, mostly because they're using other pieces of the Cozy Rock toolkit. It's a very broad toolkit, and they're also more comfortable with writing SSIS scripting. It's a great tool. Nothing bad about it. I would say that the Kingsway Soft tool tends to be more complete in terms of what types of records you can write to or do without writing additional code to it. So that's the two preferences I would have. I probably would stay away from homegrown or Me Too sort of apps. These two have been the leaders so far. And I would probably choose between those two. Don, good question. Lucas, can you give advice on how bidirectional integration with CRM with another live system? Example, account may be the same modified in CRM and System X. The data structure is one-to-one the same. So synchronizing two systems is probably beyond the scope of this. I tend to say don't do it. In terms of like saying, okay, people can edit the company name in either system, and as soon as you edit in one, it should update the other. You wind up with some locking situations between the two. So, maybe there's better ways of doing it. I would tend to stay away from that as a design choice. So, in fact, if you needed to have it real time, you may have to switch out and work off of writing as code so that synchronous changes happen between the two systems rather than using a SSIS for a batch sort of an update between the two. Don, do I need the full version of SQL installed? No, thankfully you don't need the full version of SQL installed locally, although I am using, you do need access to a SSIS server. Whether that server is local or whether it's on a server that you have access to, either one of those is fine. But in this case, I just have a VM spun up that has a local copy of SQL installed. I think you can actually connect it to, in the development mode, I think you can actually connect to the, the light version of SQL, the personal version of SQL. Anyway, that's possibilities. But to run the package and integrate it, you do need the full version. You need a full SQL Server installed. One question I had was, how do I get the equivalent of a scribe seek step? So yeah, the seek step was the idea of how do I find a particular record. In that kind of case, I would use either I tend to use, instead of the seek steps, I would tend to pull the records down and use that GUID so that that goes into my source. Otherwise, if I'm just doing an upsert, I can use the upsert and say, here's the fields that I'm working off of to do the lookups. I tend to find, even with Scribe, I want to make sure that I'm asking the integration tool to do as little as possible, that I'm controlling, maybe I'm a control freak, but I'm trying to control all the data very carefully before it goes into CRM, just to make sure that I have everything in place. Very good. So hopefully that's been helpful. I think, John, comparing SSIS and Kingsway Soft versus Scribe, it's probably a little bit beyond this conversation. All three are very good tools. I don't want to, I would certainly all three have useful pieces. Just to clarify with, so I wouldn't say that, Scribe's obviously a tool that I've used a ton in the past, but, most of my work I'm doing in SSIS now, but great tools, just different things to have in your toolbox. Does Kingsway Soft work with MySQL? I don't think that Kingsway Soft would work inside of SSIS, and so SSIS runs on a SQL server, but if your source data happened to be a MySQL table, you could absolutely connect to it using like an ODBC connection, but you still have SSIS and SQL involved, but your source tables might be something like MySQL coming off a website or something like that. Very good. Well, I think we're at the top. I do have another commitment I have to get to, but hopefully this has been helpful, and I think Jason mentioned that the recording will be posted, and would love to connect with you in the future. Let me stop sharing here for a second, and if you have any questions in the future, there's my contact information. There's my Twitter handle and my email address. But hopefully this has been helpful, and appreciate your time today. Jason,
all right,
turn it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks so much. Great job. Thanks for all the questions. A lot of great feedback and a lot of interest here, which is always great to see. And Scott, if you need to drop off, absolutely understood. I do want to make a couple notes as we close out here. One, please do look for the survey that'll pop up as you close out of the session today. We really appreciate the feedback to know how the experience has been, and our speakers really appreciate it too. It should only take about 30 seconds. Second, if you're looking for other great online events this week, tomorrow we have Alex Anakia, a technical architect from Microsoft, who's going to be doing an applied Internet of Things presentation that relates to both Dynamics CRM and Dynamics AX. That's real use of the Dynamics products as well as other Microsoft technology in their IoT suite, and how that connects with big data and connects with Power BI and all sorts of stuff. It's a really cool vision, kind of a demo using real technology and real scenarios. So if you have a chance, check that out. You can find that under the live events section of our website. With that, we'll close it out. Scott, thanks again. Really appreciate your time today. And we will conclude on that note. Have a great day.